Right. Okay, so we are back now. Sorry ya, perangai cikgu. Kita kena recap. So what have we learned so far? We've learned understanding the importance of asking questions. We understood what is the difference between constructive and dismissive, constructive response and dismissive behavior. And we've also learned how to identify dismissive behavior so that you can share with your children. Now, for the meat of the episode, we're going to look at psychological impact, and then we're going to move on to tips, strategies, and tricks that you can share with your children or you can utilize yourself as well. Now, let's look at psychological impact. So we're going to do this comprehensively. So we're going to look at impact on confidence, learning motivation, effect on emotional and social impacts, and then we're going to look at long-term consequences. Okay, so first of all, let's get started with impact on confidence. Okay, so the thing with confidence is this, right? So when your children are not taught how to speak up, or when they try to speak up, instead of being nurtured, they are being squashed. First thing that happens, the children immediately start to develop fear of speaking up. Okay, why is this? Yalah, every time kita cuba cakap, orang pelekehkan kita, kita jadi the joke of the class. So eventually we are labeled. So eventually the children don't speak up. So they develop real fear of speaking up. Now, this is another thing, yeah. So maybe, like you see, classroom is a social setting, right? Let's say your child is like one of these students that I know, they are actually quite brave. They actually want to ask a lot of questions. Even though dia pelekehkan, dia macam tak kisahlah, I still want to know my answers, right? Now, what happens is, she is the only one that has these questions, because everybody else have learned the social cues. Oh, this teacher is going to do it like this. The teacher is going to make fun of me, or the teacher is going to ask me to shut up, or, you're going to do all these things, right? So all the other children start to keep quiet. Now, the child who is still brave and who still wants to learn, what's going to happen to them? That's right. They are going to develop a serious sense of self-doubt. They're going to doubt, kenapa aku je yang ada soalan? Orang lain tak ada pun. So aku je yang bodoh. Or is it, am I the only one who doesn't understand? Like, why is it that I'm not able to understand? During our discovery sessions where, before we take any students at Pass Excel, we do a thorough discovery session. And one part of the discovery session is a meeting or an interview with the teacher. So I've heard the students say this, they're very confused. They start doubting their own intelligence and their own abilities. It is really sad to see. So this is another impact on the child's confidence. Okay, now imagine if I continuously doubt myself, if I continuously think I'm not good enough, I am not smart enough, which is what's happening, right? Because I get all these cues. What's going to happen? I am going to end up with a very low self-esteem. So now, here's my question to those of you who are bosses, who are in C-suites, in corporate, right? You've gone to you've gone to a meeting, Malaysian employees, especially the younger ones, or now I assume some of even the older ones, because, our education system has been bad for some time now. When you ask question, oh, okay, what do you guys think about this? What do you think we can do? Quiet. There's no response. There's nobody who wants to speak up. Product of our education system, because eventually the child gets this idea, siapa lah aku? Who am I? Why should I even bother speaking out? Like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. So they eventually feel undervalued and insignificant. This is bad. So if you're a teacher listening to this, please remember that this is your call to make a difference in our education system. Yeah, as a teacher, there's so much you can do to build a better future for our country. So, and that starts by letting them ask questions in class, encouraging, building a culture where students love asking questions in class, right? Now, having said that, we also need to look at what is the impact on learning motivation when we stop students from speaking up or asking questions in class, right? The first thing, okay, let's not look at C-suite, corporate. Let's just look at our own house, okay? Let's say kita married, we're parents. Okay, katalah kita cuba satu hari ni pergi dapur nak tolong. Lepas tu, your wife says, tak payahlah, tak payah. You every time you do this, jadi semak je tempat ni. Nanti I yang kena bersihkan. Susah tau. Tak payahlah. Then you try again, second day. Kan I dah cakap, tak payah. I buat je sendiri. So, if you got level of patience, maybe you try 3-4 times. Okay, let's say you're super patient, you try 10 times. What's going to happen? Every single time, your interest to help is going to go down, 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 down. Tu dah kira own married couple, right? Married, and it's your own wife. Now, for children, can you imagine every single time they cakap, yalah, dipelekehkan every single time. What's going to happen is their level of engagement with that material is also going to go super down. So they're not going to participate in class. They're not going to put in effort to study more or learn, connected materials. No, they're just going to be like, okay, if you say so, no need lah. Now, why this is a problem? Because you need to understand, once they have a decreased engagement towards the subject, right? What's going to happen to their academic performance? You dah jadi tak suka subject. Kita kena faham, because students don't say, oh, I hate science. They usually say, I hate Mr. So and so. His classes are so boring. Like, I don't want to learn. Because you would see that when you have an interesting teacher, suddenly the child becomes super interested in learning the subject. So I've experienced students who, in their previous school, they did not like business studies and economics. And then when they shifted to Pass Excel, then suddenly they're like, oh, this subject is very interesting. It's like relatable to real life. It teaches us about what's happening in the world and everything. So if you ever go to our testimonial page, you can see our students speaking like this. So when the teachers are good, they encourage students to ask questions, they make the class relatable. First, the engagement goes up. The engagement with the material, the engagement with the subject, they start to learn more, they start to want to open their book more often and stuff like that. And that then results in improved academic performance. Now, when we don't do that, first, the engagement goes down, right? Then what happens is they then start stopping to wanting to take up challenges. Okay, so it's like this now. When they like the subject, when they're engaging with the subject, then they suddenly feel like, I can do this, like this is good, like so good at this. And then they take up, okay, let me try a bit harder, But when the engagement goes down because of the teacher's attitude and because, they're not being able to speak up and ask questions, they also start avoiding challenges. They don't want to do anything that is more challenging. And unfortunately, it usually spreads to other areas of their life. All right, so we've looked at all these things that I've mentioned. We've looked at the effect on learning, right? Learning motivation especially. Now let's look at what is the emotional and social effects. So one of the first things that happens when they're continuously being dismissed is that the students then start to socially withdraw. Okay, how does this work? Because they are being constantly dismissed in classroom settings, right? So whenever they are in the classroom, they are there, physically there. They are there. They are present. They're sitting down on that chair. But their mind is not there anymore. Because they don't like the teacher. They don't like the teacher. They don't like the environment. They check out. So they just sit there. And it doesn't help that most teachers, since they prefer the quiet classroom, they don't even notice the student has checked out. Now, kalau dia check out masa kelas je tak apa. Okay, let me tell you a story. We've experienced this. This girl was in government school. Her Malay is not very good. Now, she is Malay, but her Malay is not very good, right? Because parents speak English at home most of the time. So she prefers communicating in English. Now, in government school, the teachers start picking on her. Oh, macam Mak Saleh lah, you ni lupa, whatever that they say lah. Right? I don't want to repeat that here. So because she got all that, and then friends started like also isolating her, like leaving her, pulaukan dia sebab because her Malay is not very good. Eventually, the child's social withdrawal was not just in classroom settings. Parents, so again, this we discovered during the discovery session. So when we did the discovery session, one part of it is actually psychometric assessments. So when we did the assessment, the child is actually proven to be a social butterfly, very outgoing, very friendly, jovial, and all that. Then when we do the one-to-one interview, the child's not like that at all, but we can see she has a sense of humor. She like a dry humor here and there, it's coming out, but she's very guarded. She's very quiet. So when the third part of the process is, of course, talking to the parents. So when we spoke to the parents, we see there's a misfit here. There's a mismatch, actually. There's a mismatch between what the psychometric assessment is showing and what your child is demonstrating. Then the mom came up and said, actually, this was not the case. She was actually a really outgoing child. But when she started school, because of this problem, she started feeling isolated in school. And then the problem extended to home, where she doesn't want to talk to the parents so much. She doesn't want to socialize with the cousins. So the feeling of isolation actually can extend. So because they feel disconnected, right? They feel lonely. So it starts to spread to other areas of life. This is, if you have children who are like this, you really need to pay attention to them, because what I noticed is some parents, so in her case, her mom was very attentive. The mother noticed that. But the dad, on the other hand, thought that, alah, biasalah, budak sekarang nak jadi remaja, memang ada perangai, memang macam ni, dia tak tahulah, dia moody lah, girls, lah, very moody. So the father dismissed that. The father didn't think that was a very serious matter. But it was so serious that she was borderline getting into depression, right? So, kita tak nak pelekehkan benda macam ni. Kita tak nak macam, we don't want to minimize the impact what the things can do to our children. So, it's very important. These are some of the emotional and social effects that your children can experience if they're not encouraged to speak up. Now, the next one, what we want to look at is, what are the long-term consequences of being dismissed and not allowed to speak up, right? So the first thing, they actually develop they have an issue with authority figures. So the girl I mentioned just now, over the period of time, she has issues with her own father, because they're dismissed so often in school with the teacher, right? The problem is, kita ingatkan cikgu tu cikgu je tau. But you must understand, when most children, they are exposed to a teacher figure as early as, 4 years old? Because we send our children to daycare, kindergarten, and whatever not, right? So in the child's mind, the teacher is somewhat like a third parent. So they have a position of authority, they have a position of love. So for the children who are raised very well, yeah, they see teachers as a position of love, position of care, a caregiver, and all that. So can you imagine, every day you're getting dismissed by someone who you see as your caregiver or an authority figure? Eventually what happens is, you develop a distrust for anybody who is an authority figure. And then it starts affecting not just their relationship with their future teachers, but also mentors, employers, in this girl's case, even her own father. Right? So this is actually the long-term consequences of being constantly dismissed. Now, this is something not what we wish for our children, right? And then it impacts all their future learning. Okay, why does this impact their future learning? So you would have noticed, very simple example, I think, would be this one student that I had, right? So what happens is, I tell you what happened. Okay, I tell you how I actually managed to see what is the problem here. So this girl came to us somewhere when she was in year 9. Her mom switched schools because the mother said, I don't think so, she's doing very well in the current school. I would like something more personalized, something more focused on her. So we had all the sessions, and then we brought the girl in, right? So we already knew, even in our initial assessment, we know her mathematics is quite weak. So when I was teaching her maths, so of course year 9, right? So we started with algebra. The mom told, and also in our assessments, we know her algebra is quite weak. So we did the algebra. When we started algebra classes, I thought algebra was weak. Okay, then when we were doing the question, I noticed she cannot make X the subject matter. So for parents who have forgotten algebra, let me just explain here. So that means you move things around and then you make X the subject matter, right? So for that, you need to know the operations in maths. Now, operations math is something you learn much earlier. So I thought, okay, so operations is the problem. So I started focusing on the operations. Then when I was teaching her operations, I noticed she got problem with division, fractions, because in maths, like things, especially in algebra, things will move up and down and whatever not, right? She got problem with division, fractions. So then I had to move down. So when we are moving division, fractions, that means we are going back to primary school. Now we are going, I'm drilling down to find out the problem. So we are already somewhere, I remember I'm going through with her with something like year 6, year 5 syllabus maths. but she's in year 9. Yeah? Then when I'm teaching this division, I realized she has multiplication table problem. Now, when we hit the multiplication table problem, I know there's a serious issue because from our initial conversation with the mother and her and whatever not, this girl comes from an Islamic school and she has memorized the entire Quran. So to me, it doesn't make sense. You have memorized the entire Quran, impossible that you cannot remember multiplication table, right? So then I called the mom. So when I called the mom, then I spoke to the mom. I said, Kipuan, this is the issue. I explained how I got here. And then the mom said, yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate how your school is functioning, like, the level of communication and how closely you guys are working with us. I really appreciate the collaborative effort. Then she said, yeah, she's always had a problem with maths. It started early on and everything. So I said, what actually happened? So I probe. Eventually, the mother said, this was in another Islamic school, apparently, when she was in her primary years. That's why they switched. The teacher told the girl that maths is not important for you. You're a girl. Maths is nothing. You don't need to know this. You don't need to be good at this. Anyway, you're already not good at it. You don't have to focus on it. See, I told you earlier, right? The kids view teachers as position of love, a position of care. So from someone who you see as a caregiver telling you this, the child chose to believe it. And for us to undo this, wow, it really took a lot of effort. We had to change the child's belief system at the core to make sure that it does not impact any future learning. So this is very true, yeah, because we've also had students where in the previous school, the child was told they were dumb, like, oh, they really cannot perform and whatever not. And then when they come here, we work on their mindset, we work on their belief system, then suddenly the boy is getting A star. So if you want to know about these students, please check out our testimonial videos on YouTube. You will see them, what are the differences that they've experienced here, yeah? So this is the impact on future learning, right? Now, lastly, I want to touch on a very important subject here. If you look at these two students, right, one that he was told he is dumb, and the other girl who was told mathematics is not important. What this did to them is it changed their self-perception. It changed how they viewed themselves as a person. So for the longest time, because the boy, he is very close to me, and now he's in the UK already, in continuing his tertiary education, right? For the longest time, he believed the teacher is true, the teacher knows better. Because, of course, as a student, you will feel that, right? Because the teacher sees more students than you, the teacher is older than you, the teacher is the subject matter expert. You're just learning the subject for the first time. So this boy really believed the teacher that he is dumb. And can you imagine, if he didn't come here, it would have left him thinking that this is all that he can reach up to. This is the limit of his aspiration, right? He cannot even think that he can go beyond this. So what happens is this dismissiveness behavior eventually makes students dream lesser, think themselves smaller, and reduces their willingness to pursue things. Right? And this is very dangerous. So because of that, we want to make sure that this doesn't happen to our children. How do we do that? Next, we're going to explore the strategies for empowerment and advocacy. That's what we're going to look at next, right after this break.
My name is Young Chai and I'm 17 years old this year, and I'm a student from Pasik Sam. I definitely feel that I'm more motivated to do well in my studies, and I'm also a much more confident person now in terms of academically and also in person. And I definitely noticed that I have the courage to take up responsibilities, challenge, and opportunities.